Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians. And this week we are going to be discussing books that you can read in a day, or, maybe a weekend if you need a little more time. As you're listening, if you'd like to get your hands on any of these books, to get a physical version of it, hardcover, paperback, CD, audio, or a large print, you can request those through our online catalog, and that address is there on our screen. Or you are always welcome to call your local branch of the Monroe County Library System and let them know that you heard about a title while you were watching this, and they will help you get your hands on a copy. As we talk about the books, the various formats that they are available in will appear on your screen. Some of those are going to be digital formats like Overdrive, and you may also have heard Overdrive referred to as Libby if you have their Libby app downloaded onto your device. And Overdrive offers ebooks and downloadable audiobooks. You may also see Hoopla listed. Hoopla offers downloadable ebooks, downloadable audiobooks, and also movies, music, and graphic novels. RB Digital is another digital platform, and they offer downloadable audiobooks and also unlimited digital magazines and week-long passes to Acorn TV and the Great Courses. And the great thing with Hoopla and RB Digital is that there's never a wait. If you see an item on either of those platforms, you can immediately download it to your device. And now to introduce the folks who are with us this week. I'm Jennifer Grodesky, and I am the Community Librarian at the Dundee branch. And our introductory question this week is to share about our perfect day. Since we're talking about books you could read in a day, what would your perfect day look like? And I thought about this, and I decided that I would want to spend my day, first of all, going to Hidden Lake Gardens early in the morning on a perfect 70-degree day. And I love hiking their 3-mile hikers trail. They tell you it's 2.5 miles, but if you stop at 2.5 miles, you won't make it back to the parking lot. So be prepared that it's really 3 miles. And it's lovely and wooded, and I'm not a nature person, but I really enjoy that trail, and it's almost always quiet and secluded. Occasionally you might see somebody else, but usually you are out there by yourself. So I would start my day with that, have lunch next to the lake there at Hidden Lake Gardens, and then I'd come home, probably take a nap, and then if this reading nook next to the lake existed in my home, I would then go and read there. And I think I'd end my day with a good old-fashioned family movie night. So I think to me, that's a perfect day. It's relaxing, get a little exercise in, a little nature, a little nap, and any day with a nap is a good day for me. So that is my perfect day. Also with us this week, we have Kristen Brown, who is a reference librarian at the Bedford Branch Library. And what would your perfect day be like, Kristen?
So my perfect day would begin with coffee and a book, some quiet time to read. And then I immediately thought of, and I think part of this might be Jennifer, because I'm reading that A Season with the Witch, because of course I had to get that. So, and I actually did go to Salem one year and we stayed in Gloucester. And so I think my perfect day would start with a book and coffee and then walking around Gloucester, maybe hitting up Salem, some kind of historic town. And then just spending the day with people that I love, friends and family, eating lots of delicious food. And then closing the evening with maybe some kind of fire. So if it's like a cozy fireplace or a bonfire outside, so that would be my perfect day. Probably fall, because I love fall. So nice cool day. That's what I'm thinking.
That does sound perfect. I'll join you on your perfect day, Kristen. Also with us this week, we have Jen McCarty, who is a reference librarian at our Ellis Branch Library. And what would your perfect day be, Jen?
Why are these questions always so hard? Okay, so I thought of something doable, but possibly a little out there. I love Disney World. So I think my perfect day would be a day spent at Magic Kingdom, where you get there super early, go to Be Our Guest for breakfast, which if you're not familiar with Disney World, that's the Beauty and the Beast themed restaurant. I like their breakfast. I think it's delicious. It's kind of French themed. Plus, then if you get there early, you can possibly get into the park early. So I'm thinking this through. So then do all my favorite rides, you know, at the park. The teacups is my favorite, and hopefully I'm with someone who lets me go fast. My husband gets sick, so he always whines. And then I would want to end with dinner at Cinderella's Royal Table, which is the restaurant inside the castle, and it's delicious and it's extravagant and it's amazing. And then the fireworks. I would just want a whole big Magic Kingdom day where I get to do all the really expensive, fancy things that I don't normally do because they're expensive and fancy. So that's my perfect day. Disney World. Jennifer's frozen.
Oh no. That's a good fancy.
That sounds delightful, Jen.
Now we wait.
So I don't know how to make Jennifer come back.
There she is.
She's moving. You're back.
Am I? Okay,
Yes.
I seemed fine to me. So I don't know what that was. So for anybody that missed what I happened to be saying, I'm going with Jen on her day.
Yeah.
And then also with us, we have Stephanie Winterstein, who is the Youth Services Librarian at Ida and Summerfield Petersburg.
Hello, everyone. I thought about this too, and this could go in many avenues. You know, do I want it just a day just to myself without my family? Do I want my family? Do I want just my husband? I don't know. But I decided that my perfect day would be going anywhere. We've spent a lot of time at home lately, so normally this is a time of year we like to take a little trip, and we really haven't done that. So I would like to go anywhere that I haven't ever been. I'd like to go exploring. I'd like to eat foods that I've never tried, you know, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks, and you know, just enjoy wherever it is that I'm traveling, and then, you know, just spend time, I suppose, with my family, all of them. They can come, but just make some really great memories. So I think that would be my perfect day.
That does sound really nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
I also like that you brought up, I don't know if it's just me by myself or with my
Right.
kids or my husband, because that's a very valid point, especially
Those are all
nowadays when you're
completely
spending
different
time
trips.
with people in your house
Yes.
all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie. That sounds fair. It's surprising how much we really want to leave our houses and see different things now. Like how much we appreciate that. Because before it was like, no big deal. We'll just do a day trip somewhere.
Right.
That'll be fun. And now it's like, no, it is a big deal. You got to really think about it and what's going to be open and what can we get into and do.
Right.
Also with us this week, we have Barbara Kruger, who is the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Monroe County Library System. And what would your perfect day be like, Barbara?
Well, when I saw that you had this as our introductory question, I'm like, oh, I know the answer to that. I've already planned my perfect day. So about a year ago, I was going through a very difficult personal situation. And on purpose, I took a day off of work and I called it like a self-care day. And I took the entire day and planned out all the fun things I would like to do, just, you know, for me, things that make my heart happy. And because I am the way I am, I, of course, wrote them down in a list. And it started with first thing in the morning to wake up without an alarm. I love waking up when I'm done being tired. It included quiet time for prayer and meditation. I picked the exact yoga workout I wanted to do. I had planned out all of my meals. Food is a very important part, well, of my life, and at least of that day. So all my favorite things to eat. It also included a nap. I think that's a very important part of self-care and a super fun day. And then some time out in nature. That day I happened to go kayaking, which I had never done before. I really liked that and have done several times since, but I also like the new experiences. So that was my perfect day, just a day dedicated to filling me up. I think it's probably true of all caregivers. I noticed especially in women, we spend a lot of time giving to other people. And I think apparently once every 50 years, you ought to take the whole day off and treat yourself.
Treat yourself.
Definitely. I think you earned it. I think you earned it.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you so much.
Great
Barbara.
day. Yeah.
It does. And even those little moments that we need to say, take the deep breath. Yeah, that's okay. It's okay to do the self-care that we need. So thank
I
you.
have to enjoy that every single one of us mentioned some kind of food.
Yeah.
That's important on your perfect day. Well, what am I eating?
That's right.
And
It
you
is
know,
important because if it's going to be perfect, I'm eating what I want.
Exactly.
Thank you, everybody. And now to talk about our books that you could read in a day, and maybe that would fit into your perfect day. Let's have Kristen start us out with books that you could read in a day.
All right, so my two titles, the first one I'll talk about is Tuck Everlasting. This is a classic title. I believe I read it in school. It's a really great book to bring up different conversations. If you're not familiar with the book, I'll give you a short kind of review of it. It's based on this young girl. Her name's Winnie, and she is very sheltered. She's from a very proper family. They're the oldest family in the town. And her family owns this property, this wooded area that's across the street from her house. And Winnie decides that she's bored and she wants to run away. And so she ends up running away, but only to the woods across the street, because that way she can get a little taste of freedom without getting too crazy. And she meets a boy there, and this boy is drinking from the spring. And so she decides, I want to take a drink too. When he tells her, you can't drink from this. And so she gets upset. And then from there, you find out that this spring is a very special spring. And his family comes, and they end up kind of kidnapping her because they don't want her to tell anybody about this spring. And another man ends up seeing all this unfold, and he becomes the antagonist. And Winnie finds a unique friendship with the family, with the Tuck family. And I've read this book a million times, and every time it makes me a little teary, makes my heart feel real full. I love Winnie as a character. I love the choices that she makes, and I enjoy that over just this short book, it's only like 120 pages, that you really kind of see her grow. The ending is phenomenal, and it's really nice. I reread it through Libby, I believe, and in that edition there's a Q&A with the author, which was really nice. So the author is Natalie Babbitt, and it was really interesting to read her answers to questions, because she very much relates to Winnie as how she was when she was younger, and she just relates to young readers and children in general. She was a teacher, and so that kind of helped me connect more with that book also. So it's a really short book, but it really brings up questions about what's the word, like I want to say morality, and I don't even know if that's the word I'm thinking of, but yeah, so like the characters in the story are faced with this question of getting, like, this, if this secret gets out, it's not meant for everybody to have, and it could really have this bad impact on it, but it could also make people a lot of money. And so it kind of brings up these questions of, would you want to drink from the spring? What would you do if you knew about the spring? And so I've always really enjoyed that book, and because it is such a short book, it's something that you can really read in a day, but it's also really nice because those messages will keep going with you. It's a book that you absolutely can consider thinking about further. The second book that I chose is called Woke, A Young Poet's Call to Justice, and it's by Mahogany L. Brown, Elizabeth Acevedo, and I have to think about what the last... Olivia Gatwood. I haven't done any research on her yet, but the first two authors, because I started reading this book, I went down a rabbit hole of researching them, and they are amazing women. But this book is really great because it's an illustrated poetry book. And as I've said before, anything with great illustrations, I'm immediately drawn to. I've been doing a lot of research lately on books that offer a wide variety of authors and people that I'm not familiar with. I don't usually read poetry. I appreciate it, but it's not something I usually gravitate towards. And I chose this book because with everything that's happening in the world, there's so many different resources and things to read, and it's hard to wrap your head around everything that's going on. And this book was really a chance for me to get centered and to focus. And I really appreciate the messages in this book. It covers everything from racism to empathy to identity, and it's focused for young readers, but as an adult, I felt like I connected with it immensely. Because it is poetry and it's illustrated, you could easily just, go through these and read these poems. I made it a point to read a poem each day and kind of reflect on it and see where I fit into that. What roles could I play in that? How could I make things better? Things like that. But the illustrations are beautiful and the poetry is great. It's really kind of an interesting. It's interesting because the poetry is very straightforward. You read it and it's simple and you understand it, but at the same time, the concepts are so big. And so you do reflect on it. And I really appreciated that. Also, it has a foreword by Jason Reynolds, who, if you don't know who Jason Reynolds is, he's amazing. And so after reading this, like I said, I went down this rabbit hole where I was researching the authors, and there is a great video on YouTube of Jason Reynolds and Mahogany L. Browne talking about this book, and it's amazing. These women are really great women who have these ideas of, changing the world in a positive light and really focusing on youth, which I think is so powerful right now. A lot of times we talk about books that are geared towards adults because we are adults and we read adult books, but I mean, it's really the youth that are going to kind of take control of things and change the way that things are. And so Mahogany L. Browne specifically said that she wrote this book so that young populations could read it and not only say, oh, I'm doing it right. This is what I'm doing. I am a part of this. This is great. But also to show them, like, this is where you could step up. This is where you could become a part of this. And I really appreciated that. So this is a great one-day book that really empowers you and makes you feel good, but also opens your eyes and makes you reflect. So.
Thank you, Kristen. That does sound really powerful. You can read that one, and then you can go and read The Undefeated. And because that's another one, I've talked about that one in the past. I just think there's so many books now that are finally getting their due attention.
Yes.
The Own Voices movement and things like that, where they're saying these authors have important things to say and we need to start listening.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And let's have Barbara share her books that she read in a day, or maybe a weekend.
Well, I'll start with the title I discounted for this discussion. Originally, the question was, what could you read in a day? And I was going to do Hunger Games. And that was the first book I could think of that I know I read in a day, because I actually read the trilogy in 4 days. And one of those days I had a migraine. So I know it can be read in a day. That came up at the time those books were coming out. My kids attended a very small parochial school. And our pastor called me into his office one day, which kind of felt like going to the principal's office to me. And he's like, so you're a library lady. What do you know about this book? And one of the parents had some concerns about the context and the violence in the book. And, he expressed this parent's concerns to me. And my first question was, well, did she read it? And she had not. And to me, I think you need to earn the right to have an opinion. And to have an opinion, you must read the book. So before I gave my opinion, I went home and read the book. And when I came back to, report on my findings, I said, yes, there is violence, and it is disturbing to think about children committing acts of violence. I get that. But to me, the overall theme of that book was self-sacrifice and redemptive love. And when the sister stepped up for her, I'm like, these themes are very consistent with other values you happen to hold. So maybe you should read the book before you judge too harshly. And then I loved it so much, I was like, I must read the next, and then the next. And then the movies came out, and for me, that's the end of the line. So, but I thought everybody had read Hunger Games, so I decided to go with a different title. What I'm actually going to really talk about today, one of my titles is Free Lunch by Rex Ogle. And this is a 2020 YALSA award winner, won the Excellence in Nonfiction Award. And you'd think that'd be a great reason for me to choose the book, but I didn't. I chose the book because I like the cover. So now you know how I pick my books. It's an autobiographical book. It covers Rex Ogle's life as he starts 6th grade. And some of the things in the book, the themes are universal. So I think it's difficult for everyone to go to middle school. For me, it happened in the 7th grade, and I remember that sense of anxiety, like, will I fit in? Where will I sit in the cafeteria for lunch is a universal difficulty for teenagers around, or at least around the country, I believe. So some of those struggles are universal, and I think everyone can relate to, but his struggles were compounded by poverty. And I think for those of us who did not grow up at or below the poverty line, it's a nice window into the like a day in the life of, that I think builds empathy for the character and also broadens your horizons. There are things that we often take for granted, and we don't realize how fundamental they are. Even the act of going back to school, it happens to be fall when we are taping this series, and in the book he's going back to school supply shopping with his mom, and he's already embarrassed because she doesn't behave well in public. There wasn't really enough money for the school supplies, and I think about things like that, things that I took for granted as a child, things my children took for granted when they were growing up, and the impact that has on young people. So in addition to the universal struggles of it's hard to be a teenager and his situation being compounded by poverty, as is often the case, there was a lot of abuse in his life. So there was violence in his home, and he tried to the best of his 6th grade self to keep his family together. He tried to take care of household duties. He tried to take care of his baby brother. He even balanced the checkbook, which I thought was impressive. I didn't even know young people today knew what a checkbook was.
Listen, I don't balance my checkbook.
But that's also often the case in homes where there's a lot of abuse, that the child takes on the role of the parent. And I do think that it brought out a glimpse of the choices and circumstances that brought his family to this situation, and how one small positive thing really can change the course of the family dynamic. So in this book, his mom gets a job. She becomes a waitress at a new Chinese restaurant in town, and things really turn around for them. So I found it heartbreaking and a valuable read. The other title I'd like to talk about is heartwarming. So I like to balance out my heartbreaking with a little heartwarming. And that title is Everything I Need to Know I Learned from a Little Golden Book. I happen to love little golden books. My favorite was The Pokey Puppy, which I believe I read somewhere is the most popular or most often printed children's picture book. So I'm a huge fan. It is a compilation of little snippets from Little Golden Books, compiled by Diane Muldrow, who is a longtime editor of the Little Golden Books series. And while it's kind of whimsical in appearance, I love the illustrations there, which I would just like to say are remarkable and iconic. So while it looks sweet and fluffy, they really covered almost every life situation you could imagine in the 70-year run of this series. Things like managing your money, the importance of exercise. So like some of them are save your pennies, don't forget to enjoy your wedding, being content in with life's simple pleasures, be a hugger. So each page is one page, the illustration and the text from a golden book, and then they're compiled together. And I thought it was fabulous. It's short and quick. it really is just a compilation of children picture book pages put together in a way that gives grown-ups something to think about and, make my heart happy.
Aw.
We actually have that book, and Celia and I read it. It's a really cute book. It is, yeah. It's a great quick read, but you can read it with younger kids too. And like you said, it still talks about life lessons and kind of looking on the bright side and persevering through things.
I think it also make a nice graduation gift. It's one of those milestone. It's a good book for a milestone event.
Yeah.
Gonna have to get that.
Thank you, Barbara.
Welcome.
And let's have Stephanie share your books that you could read in a day.
Okay, mine are not as, I don't know, full of good feelings and all that good stuff. One of them was just because it was pretty mindless and I could read it and I enjoyed it. Doesn't have a lot.
Did you judge your book by its cover? Did you pick it because you like the cover?
I'll be completely honest. Because I read kids' books all day, I don't read for myself a whole lot. So when it's time to read, if a book doesn't catch me right away, I am not going to waste my time reading it. So it's good that if I make it through a book, I don't have a lot of time to read for my own pleasure because I'm too busy reading other books for work. But this first one is a Meg Cabot book. It's called No Judgments. I don't really know what grabbed me, but I really enjoy Meg Cabot and her writing, so I thought I would give it a shot. And it was just enjoyable. It was about Bree. She is from New York City. She comes from money, and she is starting over in a little island in the Florida Keys. And she doesn't know anything about island life, but there's a hurricane coming. And, down there, they know how to deal with it. But she's like, it's fine. I'm just going to stay here and hunker down and I'll be fine. But everyone back home, she has a very controlling mother. She has an ex-boyfriend who's got money and he wants to fly down his helicopter, like all people do, and bring her home. But she says, no, I'm going to stay here in the hurricane. Well, what happens is when the hurricane comes, a lot of pets are stranded. And so that's her mission, is that she's going to go around and help with all of the pets who have been abandoned or left behind in the hurricane. But there's also a little romance. So this could have come with last week too. But I enjoyed it. I just read it in a day and I enjoyed it. And I would say if you want something that's just easy and enjoyable, that would be a good book.
She wrote a second book. It's not like a sequel to this, but it's set in the same town, Little Bit Island.
Yes.
And it just came out Tuesday, and it's called No Offense.
Oh, I'm gonna have to read it.
And the main character is a librarian.
Oh, definitely gonna have to get it then.
So I'm on the list for it. But yeah, I'm really
I'll
excited
add
about
it
that.
to my-
She loves librarians.
Yeah.
So plug for Meg.
Now, the second book it's called The Happiness Project, but it's the full title is The Happiness Project, or Why I Spent a Year Trying to Sing in the Morning, Clean My Closet, Fight Right, Read Aristotle, and Generally Have More Fun, by Gretchen Rubin. I know it's a really long title and there's no way to remember that, so I'm glad I could read it off the screen. And what you would sort of think it's one of those self-help books. I found it more of just a jumping off point for things in my life. This is an older book and I read it in a time in my life where I was looking for my path or reinventing, some things about myself. So how the book is set up is what she decided to do was she needed to change some things. So she decided for a whole year, each month she was going to focus on one thing. So 1 month would have been getting organized, or, so she would do different things to help her life get organized, not only her house and her space, but her mind. And it kind of spoke to me. So instead of, you could read it a little at a time, but I chose to just kind of read it all at once. read the chapter, see what she was doing that month, and then I made my own list of things that I could do for myself to, okay, so what is my happiness project going to be? Like, what do I need to make myself happy? And so, and that's, I can't say I did it in the full entirety, but I used it as a jumping off point for myself to like, okay, I want to get into better shape. I want to get organized. I need to, you know, save money, and I need to do the, and I just kind of came up with my own plan. So I just found it kind of inspirational. And so, you know, in a day I had a whole new life plan. And
Nice.
yeah, you know, so I don't know, it's got some little witty snippets in it and some good advice, but like I said, it's a good plan to sort of, you know, look at yourself and then, you know, readjust what you think is important to make you happy in life. So I recommend it.
That's a good choice for a weekend read, though. Like,
Yes.
you read on the weekend and then you're energized for Monday. And like you said, you kind of jump off at that point and figure out.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I like that.
2 thumbs up.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Jen, what are your one-day reads?
So the first book I want to talk about, I've seriously been waiting for a spot where I could fit this in to Literary Libations because I loved it so much. Since I read it, I'm like, does it fit? Not yet. Does it fit? Not yet. I can do this one. So my first book is All Those Explosions Were Someone Else's Fault by James Allen Gardner. And some of you said you picked books based on the cover. Not gonna lie, wanted to read this based on the title. This was actually one of my book club picks. And we generally vote on our picks. We vote on our books, and I put this one on the list because I like the title. And basically all of us were like, I don't know what that's about, but it sounds fun. And it was. So All Those Explosions Were Someone Else's Fault. It follows 4 women. I'll kind of come back to that a little bit, who are roommates. They are all college students. They are all in different science vocations. So one of them is a biologist, one of them is a geologist, one of them is, I don't remember what the other 2 are. They're different areas of science. So these 4 roommates are together one evening. Okay, well, I need to back up. I'm so excited about this book. It starts off with like a joke, and it's like, oh, a vampire, a werewolf, and a something else walk into a bar. Oh, hold on, mate, that might not make sense to you. So it sets it up where it's like, you know, infinite universes, and they all have different stuff. This world has all of those kind of things out in the open. And so basically what happened was sometime in the 80s, there was like a classified ad, basically, like, hey, you want a lot of power? Call me up. And eventually people start doing it, and they discover that there's like this sort of secret society, and you can go through what they call the dark conversion, and you get, you become some kind of like supernatural creature, but you have to pay for it. So it ends up being that like all of the most wealthy people in the world go through this dark conversion. So you have all these vampires, werewolves or were creatures, there's were everything, other kind of like ghosts and demony kind of things. But they're like the wealthiest people in the world. So sort of the richest parts of society are also the darkest parts of society. So because the universe likes balance, at one point, these people call sparks come forward, and they're basically superheroes. So these 4 roommates are normal, everyday people. One evening, the main character's name is Kim, and she sees a couple of, they call them darklings, walking through campus, and she's like, that's weird. It's right before the holidays. The place is pretty much empty. So she follows them like you do. There ends up being a huge explosion, and she kind of freaks out, and she gets her friends, and they go back trying to see, like, do we need to help people? What do we need to do? And basically they're exposed to this weirdness, and all of a sudden all 4 of them become sparks. So they all have superpowers now. So the main character, Kim, and I loved Kim because she was a totally different character. Kim is really sort of gender neutral. So in this first book, she still uses like she, her, like pronouns, but like as she evolves, the second book she doesn't, she changes. But she's more like just really gender neutral. She dresses very androgynous. She kind of makes some jokes at times that she likes it when people aren't really sure, like, are you a boy? Are you a girl? I don't know. And like the name Kim could kind of go either way. But Kim is the geologist, and she gets the power to shrink. So she goes from her regular height to smaller, but when she changes, her skin becomes like rock. So she's kind of impenetrable, but she can shrink down to like tiny little speck. Super cool. But of course, this book takes place over the course of a day, and it's a fast read, so kind of a 2-for-1 there. They get sucked into this weird, supernatural vacuum with sometimes sparks go bad. And even though they're sparks, they're supposed to be the superhero, they're supposed to be the light, sometimes they become super geniuses and evil villains, mad geniuses. And there's a mad genius and he wants to cause trouble, and it's crazy. It's just super, like, all these things keep happening, and of course there's a ton of explosions. And all those explosions were someone else's fault. I think the books are going to end up following all 4 different characters. So the second book came out, and I immediately was like, I need to read this too. Another fun title. It's called, I'm going to get it wrong. It's something to the effect of, They Told Me the Gun Wasn't Loaded. Also funny. And it follows another one of the characters. So the other, like, they all have to come up with superhero names and costumes, and they have to do it because it's this weird thing where, like, if you have your superhero identity, like, it's kind of the Clark Kent thing. Oh, I put on glasses. Where did Clark go? It works that way. So, like, one of the characters ends up wearing, like, all of her hockey gear, and she names herself 99, which is Wayne Gretzky's character. Kim names herself Zircon, which is, a very, very hard, rock or mineral or whatever. One of the other girls names herself Aria because she's got, like, sound powers. It's just fun. It's totally different, a little bit supernatural, a little bit science fiction-y, but just super fun. And I loved the character of Kim because she's so different. And you don't, and I've read a lot of books that try to put some diversity in, and I will say Kim is Asian Canadian. This book takes place in Canada. One of the characters is, I believe, like Indian or South Asian of some sort. One of the girls is, I think maybe the other 2 are both like Caucasian, but it's a diverse cast, and then you have one of the characters who's a little bit, the gender is a little bit different. Like I said, the second book, she kind of evolves even further. But a lot of times it feels forced, and it didn't. Like, all of the choices made here just made sense. Like, I didn't feel myself going, what is Kim? What's Kim's deal? Like, she's Kim. It's cool. Like, it made perfect sense to me. And I loved the diversity, but also it was just fun. So I get excited. All those explosions were someone else's fault. I read it really quick.
I'm gonna check that out.
It's a lot of fun. I read it really fast. I read the second book really fast. The author needs to get going because I want more. So that's my first one. The second book I wanted to talk about was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. And there's also a movie on this, which I haven't seen, but this one follows Jacob. So Jacob has grown up with his grandfather, who tells him these crazy stories of surviving World War II. And he lived with these peculiar children and the bird, I'm trying to think exactly how he calls her, like the bird woman or whatever. Jacob assumes all these stories are fake. Like, how could they be real? Well, then when Jacob is 16, his grandfather is brutally murdered and he sees it. And he starts to kind of go, maybe he was telling the truth, like some of these crazy stories. So part of Jacob's, like, healing from the trauma of seeing his grandfather murdered is they go to Wales, where his grandfather grew up. His therapist thinks that maybe if he sort of confronts, like, the stories, in his grandfather's past, he'll be able to, like, be okay with this. Well, he gets to Wales and goes to the house where his grandfather lived, and it's empty and it's derelict and it's weird, and he's like, I don't, this doesn't make any sense. Well, then all of a sudden he kind of finds himself basically back in time, and he discovers that there is a time loop that kind of takes you back to the time period where his grandfather was there, and he gets to actually meet all of the peculiar children, and they have like the girl on the cover, you can see, they all have different, like, powers. There's a girl, there's an invisible boy, there's a girl that has a face on the back of, like, she basically has 2 faces or a mouth on the back of her head. There's a whole bunch of different, the different powers or different physical structures. And of course, there's kind of a mystery. Like there's good guys and there's bad guys, and Jacob has to figure out like how to try to save these people. But what really makes this book cool is the photographs. And I don't have a copy, and I requested a copy, and it's on its way. I'm probably going to get it today, and then I'm sad because I wanted to share some of the pictures. But the photographs that pepper it are of the children, and even though they're not real, they look really cool. And they've got, they're supposed to take place during World War II or, around that era, so 30s, 40s. And so they're really, it's this weird, like, historic, but, like, kind of peculiar. The photographs, for me, made the book, but it's such a cool, different story as well, because you kind of have this mystery, you have this weird time loop, like, Jacob's confronting his own, like, personal issues, but then realizing, like, my grandfather wasn't crazy, all this stuff is really real. Just a super fun book and totally different. So it's really, really good. And like I said, I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know if they did the book justice, but there is also a movie out there. And I know there's an audiobook, but this is one that I think you need to hold the physical book because you need to see the pictures because they add so much to the story. And they're just so well done.
And the pictures, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the pictures are, how do you word this? They're historical pictures.
Yeah.
Ransom Riggs didn't recreate these pictures in modern day. They're pictures from, the 20s and 30s and 40s. I believe so. Pre-Photoshop.
Yeah.
But using photography, experimentation. So there's all these tricks in there. So they're really strange and interesting, and some of them are creepy.
Yeah, they play this on your brain.
Absolutely, and that's,
like,
I think I've
studied them. Like,
how did they do that?
Yeah. And that's said, I was really I requested the book on like Tuesday, and I'm like, oh, it's gonna be here. It's not.
Yeah. Especially is it the Invisible Boy or like the twins? What are the twins where they have the suit?
Yeah.
That's when I was, what?
This is a while since I've read it, and I wanted to be able to flip through it, and it didn't happen. But it's just, the story is really cool, and it's a quick read, and it's fun. Maybe not a day, but definitely a weekend. But it's another one that the images just add so much, especially since they're photography, and it's not Photoshop. It might be tricks, and it might not be real, but
they had to do it physically somehow, either with the camera and the lenses or with where they were shooting it or superimposing them. Like it's really interesting to look at those photos. So that's a good one. Again, my favorite part of it was also the photos there.
Yeah,
too.
The book, the story is good, but the images.
Thank you, Jen. And my books that I read in a day. My first one was also one that, since we've been doing this, I keep thinking I really want to talk about this one. I really love this book, but it never seemed quite right. But it is only 173 pages long, and I picked it up because it references some of my other favorite books, The Chronicles of Narnia. Before I get into describing it, let me tell you, it is not the Chronicles of Narnia. If you go in expecting the Chronicles of Narnia, you're going to be shocked and horrified. So don't pick it up thinking that. I just want to clarify that for the beginning. The book focuses on Eleanor West's home for wayward children. And it is a boarding school, and the sign on the door says no solicitations, no visitors, and no quests. So you cannot go questing if you are at Eleanor West's home for wayward children. And this school was created for children and teenagers who had been through a portal. So the people like the children in the Chronicles of Narnia that went through a wardrobe, Alice in Wonderland, the boy in the Phantom Toll Booth, that in some way they leave our real world and move into this other world. The problem is they get into the other world and they have been drawn there because that world represents their heart and soul. So when they are in that world, they feel for the first time like they utterly and completely belong there. But then something happens to each of these children in that world where they feel so much a part of it, and that is where they should be, that they are sent back into our world again, and they are devastated because they have been ripped away from where they felt they belonged. And now they are dealing with that. And some of them don't deal with it in positive ways. And so Eleanor West experienced this herself as a child, and so understands these children and teenagers who are feeling like this, but still need to function in this real world. And she is doing her best to help them do that. So not only is all of that going on, but then children are being killed at the school. So there's also this whole murder mystery going on, and it all gets solved in 173 pages. So it's a lot, and this book moves. The characters are great and interesting and oddballs. And my favorite part wasn't actually so much the murder mystery, but the descriptions of the worlds that each of these children and teenagers are missing so desperately, because they are, some of them are strange and horrifying, and some of them are just wild and psychedelic, and some of them are quiet and calm. And I just love that. And in fact, when I finished it, and I finished it, I'm sure, in a few hours, the audiobook is 4 hours. So if you're a listener, it would take you about 4 hours to listen to it. And I'm pretty sure I was reading the pages even faster than that. When I finished it, I was sad that it was over, because I was like, no, this book should be longer. I would go back into these worlds with these kids again and find out what they experienced there and spend more time there. Well, apparently the book was popular enough that Shannon McGuire has since written more, and they are all about the same length, about 150 to 200 pages, and each of them focuses on a different child now. The first one is still my favorite, but they're all fabulous. I'm looking forward to every one that comes out. And Shannon McGuire also publishes under the name, I'm going to miss it, Mira Grant, which is the Feed series. So if you are a horror science fiction person, you may know her under that name, but have never read her Shannon McGuire books, which tend to be more fantasy based. But I really loved it. Be aware it is fantasy horror. So please don't go in like I sort of did, thinking I was getting Chronicles of Narnia.
The cover is very deceiving. You would think it was completely about something different.
Yes, and particularly, like I said, I picked it up because I don't tend to read blurbs real thoroughly anymore, because so many of them I feel give everything away in the blurb. Like at that point, you've already told me what most of your book is about, and I want to be surprised. So I really went in thinking it was going to be sort of light and fluffy, and it is not light and fluffy. There's humor in there, but be prepared. It is an adult book. So
that sounds really good, though. That's going on my list.
I know.
I think you would love it, Jen.
That sounds like something I would love.
Yeah. So that's my first book. My other one is a graphic novel. And I think in all of our literary libations, we've talked about illustrated books, but I think this might be our first graphic novel. Yeah. So I couldn't resist. If you've been listening to this, I have a thing for horror. And I also love horror graphic novels. I've read The Walking Dead. I've read Death Note, which is actually manga, Japanese. I'm trying to think of the other ones. House of Mysteries, The Unwritten. There's a lot of them out there. Femme Fatale. So yeah, I have a problem. A lot of those are available through Hoopla, and you will see that we do not have a physical copy of this at the Monroe County Library System. You can get it through Mel. But it's fabulous also if you have a digital device, preferably a larger one so you can see the amazing art that's in here. And this one is really interesting because it is a haunted house story for the 21st century is what it bills itself as. And it focuses on a Muslim woman living in America, and she and her friend, who is Black, have moved into a new apartment building, and unbeknownst to them, the building is haunted by a creature that feeds off of hate. And this particular apartment building is filled with people from diverse backgrounds, but it's also filled with their fear and xenophobia and their desire to push away and not try to understand someone who is other than them. And that's what that hand that you can see on the cover reaching down toward her is. It's that creature. And I don't want to give anything away. That gives you the basic premise of it. It is creepy. It is graphic. Again, this is for adults. Please don't, think you should give this to your 12-year-old. It's for adults. Look at it first. But it's got depth to it. This isn't just a haunted house story. This is a haunted house story that says, what do we do when that hate is there? How do you deal with that? And one of the quotes that's in the book says, and this is toward the end where all of this is going on with this creature. And one of the characters says, maybe it doesn't matter why this happened. All that matters is that the world's so much uglier than we want to think, and we have no idea what to do about it. Holy cow. In a horror graphic novel, they're talking about the world can be a hard place. Like, there's a lot out there. I know a lot of people think, oh, graphic novels. This one has a lot of depth to think about. The artwork is great. It's a very, I don't know art terms. It's a very rough art. I don't know how to describe it well enough. Somebody that knew more. It feels tactile in some places. But it's really interesting and thoughtful. And the reason I picked it up is because NPR put it on its list of 100 top horror stories. So, of course, that attracted me. Start going through read. Ooh, haven't read this one. So, if you have any interest, I think, in graphic novels, if you have any interest in exploring justice, social justice, and what it means to live better in the world, I think this is worth it. Even if you just want to flip through the art, you can do that and get an idea of what it's about. And it is a quick read. That's one thing with graphic novels. The other thing with this one, unlike almost all the other ones that I mentioned, this is not a series. It is a standalone, so you can read this and not feel, oh, there's another 21 volumes that I'm going to need to go and read. So that is fabulous too, because I do feel sometimes when I pick one up, like, okay, I'm in this for the long haul, right. And this one you can read and think about and be done with it. So those are my one-day reads.
I'm just so impressed at the presentation of putting those issues and those important topics that we need to talk about and presenting them in a graphic horror novel. My mind is kind of you
never know what's out there.
I mean, because there's so many, I feel like when those issues are presented, they're always presented in this certain way, and I just talked about this book, but, woke, that's a very typical way to present that. But wow, to put it in a horror graphic novel and to present it in that way, that's genius to me. My mind is blown. I don't even like horror, and I'm like, I need to
graphic novels, probably more than any other medium, explore a lot of that crazy stuff. And a lot of people, if you're not real familiar with graphic novels, you're like, oh, graphic novel, oh, it's a picture book. But they do. There's some really, really good ones. Mouse by Art Spiegelman. That's sort of an old classic. But it's World War II. I mean, it's Jewish internment camps with mice and dogs and pigs, and not at all what you'd expect when you go, oh, graphic novel. But graphic novels, I think, tackle hard topics probably better than any other medium.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense.
And some are, just fluff.
But also at the same time, I'm like, that's crazy to me.
Right. And another one and we actually did them for book club years and years ago when I was just starting to learn about graphic novels. We did Mouse and Persepolis in the same month. And I can't remember the author of Persepolis, but it focuses on, I believe she's in Iran, during the 1970s when the Shah is coming into more power, and so her family decides that they are going to have to leave. So just topics that, again, are super powerful and particularly presented in that graphic format. And her art is completely different from what you see in Infidel or in more superhero. Her art is, again, I'm not going to know, but it's more based on like color and shapes, I think, than what you see in some of the other ones. Yeah, there's a whole world. In fact, maybe that'll have to be one of our literary libations in the future, is we're all just going to talk about graphic novels, because there's so many. There's been an explosion in particular for middle grade.
I was going to
Raina Telgemeier's Smile is out there. Tony just read one that I brought home that I'm not going to remember the name of, that he was like, oh, that was really good. Tackling all sorts of different things. So yeah, but yeah, horror people got it going on.
Yeah.
You know?
That's
So
Awesome.
And there are a lot of horror graphic novels. There are a lot.
there's a lot. There's a lot. And there are amazing ones, like I think this one is, and then there are some where it's it's a standard horror tale.
yeah, I'd be better.
They aren't all 5 stars, but they're all to me entertaining. So, all right. Well, thank you to all of you for participating and sharing your books that you could read in a day. Thank you to everybody that listened. And next week, we are going the complete opposite direction, and we are talking about ridiculously long books that were worth every page. So join us next time, and we'll be talking about those really long books. And thank you, and bye.